What's good, YouTube? Welcome to part 2 of the Whatcast look into the Farstriders expansion. This time around, we're going to be looking at the unique factional objectives that are available to the Farstriders. Now, once again, the purpose of these videos is going to be to get my initial impressions, first thoughts, and hot takes about this expansion. There's not a lot of research done beforehand. This is just my thoughts as soon as I pull out the card and kind of get some sort of predictions for how this is going to affect you and your meta going forward. Without any further ado, let's begin. Alright, the first card we have is Behead the Beast. It's a 1 glory point. Score this in an end phase if your warband took an enemy leader out of action in the preceding phase. Okay, so most factions have a card sort of like this. It works better in some factions than the other. The first strike against this one is that it is not a score immediately card. And considering it's quite difficult to actually kill an enemy warband's leader, as they tend to either be the best figure in the faction or they tend to be very well protected. See the Warden or Scritch. This is asking a lot for 1 glory point. It's also an end phase card, which means it's not a score immediately card, so you don't have that benefit going for you. Add to this the fact that the Farstriders don't do an incredible amount of damage, with most of their core functionality being 1 damage, and you having to get into melee to deal a bunch of 2 and 3 damage shots in order to actually kill something. This doesn't seem like a great card for me. That being said, if you have a specific strategy in mind, and that specific strategy includes kill the enemy leader, this could be good for you, but there are a lot better universal options than this. And I don't see doubling up on this particular idea with this faction. Moving right along. Brave but cautious. Score this in an end phase if you have at least 1 surviving fighter and none of your fighters suffered any damage in the preceding action phase. 1 glory point. This is similar to Sigmar's Bulwark, which a lot of players have had success with in a very defensive-oriented deck. I'll be the first to say I don't like that playstyle. I think it's personally boring for me to play as and against. I don't particularly like it for the state of the meta. That being said, while this is a little bit easier to pull off than its Liberator equivalent, which is Sigmar's Bulwark, this is still asking a lot for 1 glory point in an end phase. It's extremely easy to do some amount of damage to something in the midst of 4 activations, plus with a lot of ploy cards now in the meta that do direct damage, this is going to be extremely difficult to ever pull off. I personally don't think it's worth it. If I was even going to try something like this, I would expect 2, maybe even 3 glory points. Again, yes, this is easier to pull off with this faction as opposed to the Liberators. They are slightly faster, and when I say that, I mean the leader himself has 1 more movement. They've got the range attacks that can help to play keep away, to knock people back, and to still be able to engage from a distance, but your opponent is going to have tools like that too. And there is a lot of fast movement in the game now. I just don't think this one's worth it. Okay, close with the enemy. Score this in an end phase if 3 friendly fighters are adjacent to enemy fighters. This is almost the polar opposite of the last card. Again, same problems as before, though. It's an end phase card. It's only 1 glory point. Taking it from the beginning of this sentence. Okay, score in the end phase. That's a problem. I've got so many good score immediately cards that I could grab. And Farstriders are very good at scoring many of the score immediately cards. I I don't feel like waiting to the end phase to score 1 glory point. Moving on. If 3 friendly fighters. This is a problem because you're only ever going to have 3 friendly fighters. Keep in mind that this is unique factional for the Farstriders. You're never going to have more than 3 guys, and if you lose one, you might as well burn this card. Finally, you have to be adjacent to enemy fighters. It means all 3 of your guys need to be adjacent to enemy fighters. They can't move away or they mess you up on this. And they can't move in such a way to maybe surround one of your other guys. This requires too much doing on the part of your opponent. And again, that's assuming they haven't killed one of your guys, they haven't knocked one of your guys out of position, and all that for 1 glory point. Not to mention that this puts the Farstriders exactly where they don't want to be, which is right up in the enemy's grill. These guys have range. That's their whole deal. That's their MO. That's their gimmick. You don't want to charge directly in with these guys. And if you do charge directly in, your goal is, in theory, going to be killing whatever you charged. And if you've killed whatever you charge against, you're not adjacent to anything. Again, this, I think, is a total trap. Eternal Supremacy. Okay, so we've seen Supremacy in the last couple of expansions. The generic equivalent of this, or I should say the universal equivalent of this, called Supremacy. This one is the exact same text and same glory points. Score in an end phase if you hold 3 or more objectives. I love Supremacy in objective decks. I think any objective that points you towards a number agnostic objective, such as Plant a Standard, Supremacy, that sort of thing, rather than pointing you towards a specific numbered objective like hold objective 1 through 5, or Tactical Supremacy, or Tactical Mastery, I believe it's called, where you get 1 through 3 or 3 through 5. Might be called Tactical Genius. I don't remember offhand. Those can be hard to pull off because inevitably one number of that objective is going to be on the other side of the board. Being able to just pick any 3 and still get the benefit of 3 glory points is excellent. It's a great value add. At 3 glory, this is exactly what I'm looking for in an end phase card. And having Eternal Supremacy within the faction means that you can double up on this and Supremacy. That's the good parts. Now for the bad parts. Holding 3 objectives when you only have 3 fighters is going to be extremely difficult. If anybody dies, and they will die, then you are going to completely be unable to score this objective and Supremacy, and probably some other ones that you put in your deck to be synergistic with this. Especially because if you have only 3 guys, it's going to be very easy to knock one of those guys off of the objective towards the end of the turn in the last couple activations. You're not necessarily going to have any backup because you don't have, 2 or 3 other guys that could go jump onto that objective. You're going to be limited to only movement shenanigans. And again, you're assuming here that your guys are still going to be alive. Knowing that this card exists, if I'm playing against Farstriders, I'm going to put everything I have into killing one of them. Not necessarily a specific one, but one of them in general. The other problem is having 3 objectives on the board. You're going to be very vulnerable to where those objectives are placed. And you can affect this on your own to some extent. If you lose the roll, you get to choose where 3 objectives are. There's a lot of ifs with that, though. One, it's a 50% chance whether you win or lose that original roll. Second, you're going to be dependent on your opponent not counterplaying you with their objective placement. Keep an eye out for a video from the Whatcast in the future on how to do that. And then you're also going to have to worry about your opponent having a warband that's going to be fast enough to still threaten you wherever you put these. That they might have ways to get to the other side of the board. See the new Pac-Man card, or Scritch Spite Claw's ability to resurrect a rat in your board space. This, again, is a pretty big ask. I like that it's 3 glory for that big ask, but it's still going to be really difficult to pull off. Moving right along. Lightning Advance. Score this in an end phase if all of your surviving fighters, at least 2, are in enemy territory for 1 glory point. Again, I won't overly belabor the point of having problems with a 1 glory point end phase card. That being said, if you have to have one, this doesn't seem like a bad one. This synergizes directly with your core mechanics, that is your inspiration. You want to throw your guys into enemy territory, at least in that first or second turn. Getting a glory point for something that you needed to be doing anyway, that's great. Here's the problem. Assuming this shows up on turn 1, and you charge your guys in, that's going to decide almost your entire first turn. 3 of your activations are going to have to involve moving your guys across the line of scrimmage. That is going to dictate your strategy, which is going to limit your ability to react and proactively act against your opponent. And again, I don't like things that force my strategy in any particular turn. If this shows up in the second turn, we have another problem in that now I need to do my first turn stuff on the second turn. Chances are I've already inspired at least one of the Farstriders, so having to throw an already inspired guy into enemy territory seems like a waste of resources. Ideally, I want to only be throwing people, or I only want to be throwing Farstriders into enemy territory if they are not inspired yet. So yeah, it's okay. Probably stronger than the other ones we've seen, but not without its problems. And again, it's 1 glory point. Moving on. Meticulous Annihilation. Okay, score this in end phase if all enemy fighters have been taken out of action. 3 glory points. Okay, so there are a number of cards like this. We now have Annihilation, which is a 3rd end phase card, gets you 5 glory. We have Total Annihilation, which you need to score in the first or second round. And in theory, you get 7 glory points. And then you've got this guy for 10. That represents a couple of problems. So, yes, this has an advantage over Total Annihilation in that you can score it in any end phase. It also has the same advantage over Annihilation. It's fewer glory points. It's only 3 as opposed to 5 for Annihilation or 7 for Total Annihilation. You only get the major benefit out of this card if you manage to table your opponent in turns 1 or 2. Never mind how difficult that's going to be with a faction whose average hit does 1 damage. By the time you've killed everybody in your opponent's faction on turn 2, you've already won the game. Yes, I know that there are some tournament formats that really encourage you to score as many glory points as possible, but if that's my strategy, if that's my game plan, I would rather have Total Annihilation and score 7 glory points. Alternately, I could put Annihilation, Total Annihilation, and Meticulous Annihilation in my deck. My whole purpose in that game is going to be to kill everybody. And if I kill everybody in turn 3, I could score 10 glory points off of 2 of those cards. If I kill everybody in turn 2, I could score a ridiculous number, but that's a really big investment for something that's going to be really hard to pull off. Again, the only factions that have few enough figures where this would be feasible are also typically extremely durable. Look at Liberators, Farstriders, or the new Magor's Fiends or Ironjaws. You would have to go all in for this card to work. This is a total commitment card, and I like those. But it's going to be really hard to pull off. I put this in the same mental space that I put Khorne's Champion. It's almost ridiculously hard to pull off, but if you do, you are amazing. Moving right along. Punishing Volleys. Score this in an end phase if you made at least 3 successful Bolt Storm Pistol or Overcharged Bolt Storm Pistol attack actions in the preceding action phase. Okay. Score this in an end phase, get 1 glory point. Same problems as always. In fact, interestingly, we, up until now, have not even seen a score immediately card unique to this faction. So that's going to be worth considering when you're trying to pick a faction. If you made at least 3 Bolt Storm Pistol. Again, this is going to kind of determine your actions in a turn. Keep in mind, 4 activations only. Now, we do have a lot of cards now that will let you get a sneaky out-of-sequence attack. It's good that it applies to both Bolt Storm Pistol or Overcharged Bolt Storm Pistol attacks. All that being said, though, this is kind of your whole faction's gimmick, is making these pistol attacks. You're probably going to do this anyway, so this is a strong addition. I can understand, given that, why it's only 1 glory point. It's not super easy to accomplish, though, because if your opponent does anything to mess up your strategy or to put your 3 guys in danger, you might have to give up one of your activations out of 4 to do something other than shoot somebody. That being said, you're probably going to be shooting people all day. So yeah, I mean, of all of these, it's probably the easiest to pull off. Ranger Strike. Score this immediately. Finally, a score immediately card. If your warband has taken 2 or more enemy fighters out of action this phase. Oh, okay. So this is definitely going to be doable if you're playing against Sepulchral Guard, Blood Reavers, Skaven, anybody that has a lot of 2 health chaff units. But you're still going to have to play around this because, again, your guys don't do an incredible amount of damage. You would have to, if you were doing this all with Bolt Storm Pistol attacks, you would need to shoot 4 times and hit with everything, assuming you're still shooting at chaff. Now, if you throw employees that can squeeze out some extra damage, or you mix a little melee in there, again, keep in mind your guys do 2 or 3 damage in melee, this would be more doable. It'd score immediately, which is excellent. If you're playing an extremely aggressive Farstrider deck, I would definitely include this. Okay, final card, Sigmar's Finest. Score this in an end phase if your surviving fighters, at least 1, are outnumbered by enemy fighters by at least 3 to 1. Okay, this is very similar to Undaunted. It's any end phase, but it's 2 glory points, which makes it pretty useful for an end phase card. You have to have at least 1 surviving fighter, and you must be outnumbered by at least 3 to 1. Okay, let's do some math. To score this when you have 3 Farstriders alive, your opponent would have to have at least 9 figures. Not going to happen. The most that exists in the game is 7. Let's cut down to Okay, you've lost one Farstrider. Now you have 2. Your opponent must have at least 6. Theoretically possible if you are playing against the Sepulchral Guard. Here's the problem with that. If your opponent has managed to kill one of your Farstriders, and you've only managed to kill one of his comparatively weak skeletons, you are probably not doing something right. Now, it's possible that you've killed more than that, and your opponent is burning a lot of actions on resurrecting skeletons. Which, if that's the case, they're making some poor decisions. But, again, I don't typically put objectives in my deck with the fervent hope that my opponent is going to do something stupid. If you're... The purpose of this channel is to talk about Shadespire at a competitive level, and presumably if you're competing, your opponents are also competitive. They're not going to be making stupid plays like that. So let's say you are down to 1. Okay, that's a little bit more doable. If you're playing against Skaven, Blood Reavers, Sepulchral Guard, pretty easy to wind up in a situation where they have 3 fighters. The problem is you're going to be in very dire straits by only having 1. Now, that being said, putting this in might be a good hedge against enemies that are playing for an annihilation win. But I kind of feel like the crux of this card, the way that you use it, is to be in a bad situation. I don't like rewarding myself for failure. Yes, I know that failure is going to happen, but that's not what I designed my strategy around. It's okay. But honestly, based on what I'm seeing out of all of the Farstriders' specific factional objectives, they're just not very good. If I were to make a Farstrider deck, it's probably going to be almost all universal objectives. If I'm going for a specific strategy, I can see some of these being effective. Maybe Eternal Supremacy, maybe Sigmar's Finest, or punishing volleys. If I'm going hardcore aggressive, trying to kill my opponent, maybe Lightning Advance or Ranger Strike. If I was trying to go for absolute annihilation, this is not the faction that I would choose to do it. That, my opinion, may change once I get a good look at the different ploys and upgrades that are available. See the future videos in this series to watch me convince myself to eat crow. Meanwhile, if you have a different opinion, please put it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear how you feel. We've gotten all of them at this point, so that'll be the end of the video. Look out for our next video in this series, which will be the Farstriders' unique factional upgrades, or our next video chronologically, which will be the unique factional objectives for Magor's Fiends. But in the meantime, hope you enjoyed it. Again, please comment, like, share, and subscribe to help us bring you more content. In the meantime, have fun playing Shadespire.